Welcome to the Global Marketing Show, the podcast for all things international business. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, president of Rapport International and a translation expert. Come along with me today as we talk to an expert in the global marketing world about facing their biggest fears, hearing about mistakes they made or saw, discussing best practices, and sharing fun travel, language, and culture stories. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Global Marketing Show. I'm your host, Wendy Pease, and I'm very excited today because our guest has lived all over the world. So we'll hear more about that in a minute. If you enjoy this episode or one or the other from the Global Marketing Podcast, please go ahead and send it on to somebody else. We're all over the world now, and I just learned that one of the prior guests got a new job offer because he was heard on the podcast. So the guests here are fantastic. They share really good information. I am so honored to be able to just sit and ask them questions to my heart's delight and learn about them. So share away, particularly if it's an episode you like. So today we welcome Laurent Kahl, who got his start in global business very, very early on, and he's lived all over the world. So Laurent, welcome.
Well, thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it, and thank you for inviting me. I look forward to our chat today.
Yes, I am too, because you've got so many awesome stories. Let's start out with what countries have you lived in?
Sure. Well, I was very fortunate from when I was born, actually. My dad was a Sears Roebuck multinational executive. As you know, Sears was the Amazon of the 20s until about the 70s, maybe. But then it faded away, as some other major American companies have. But
the Sears catalog, that used to be the thing that people leaf through for their Christmas presents.
Exactly.
I love how you compare it to Amazon. Yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, so he helped start Sears overseas. He was one of the executives to start their operations in South America, Central America, and Europe. So we kind of were army, like they say, military brats, moving every couple of years from one country to another. And, we had to adjust all the time. And naturally, I was fortunate that, he gave me the opportunity to learn 4 languages overseas and learn about the cultures of both Latin cultures and European cultures, as well as the American culture. So very fortunate.
So you were born in Caracas, Venezuela?
Yeah. My mom and dad met there. I'm a street dog, right? I'm half Italian, half American, and my grandfather was German. Anyway, a little bit of everything. So, but yeah, born there because that's where they met. My mother was visiting her sister, and they fell in love in Caracas. And then from there on, we moved on. But had the opportunity to live in Venezuela, Argentina, Panama, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and then we moved to Europe, Belgium, Italy, and Spain, because Sears had operations as well after, my dad was transferred there. So, and then came back to the States after my dad, in his last years of Sears. Naturally, the Sears headquarters is in Chicago, so that's where he retired in Chicago. So,
what elementary schools in South America and then high school in Europe, I'm guessing from the...
Yeah, all of them were American schools. Naturally, a lot of them were run by the Department of Defense, DoD, as they mentioned. But some of the elementary and middle schools and high schools all of them were American, by mostly run by other Department of Defense or the American under the American High School Association, whatever it is. But so yeah, we educated in with American curriculums, but also forced to learn the local language of that country too when we were there, because they normally taught that language where you were, right? So yeah, that was part of the requirement.
So all your education was done in English, but then you said you spoke 4 languages. So you have Spanish,
French, Portuguese, Italian, and well, I learned Portuguese when I worked in my career in Brazil for 10 years, but this was later in my career. But the French, Spanish, Italian, and English were the primary languages that I learned. Belgium, the French, the Italian, Italy, the Spanish, Natural Latin American, Spain, and then the English with the high schools and junior highs and everything else. So.
So it's real interesting when we have a translator apply to work with us, a translator or an interpreter, we're always looking for their two strongest languages because we know they're native in one, and then their second language is where they've gotten bilingual. But you've had exposure from young on to foreign languages. Like, what's your strongest language and then your second strongest, or do you feel equally competent across them?
That's a good question. With my last, say, 20 or 30 years of my career, I used my Spanish and Portuguese quite a bit because I was involved with Latin America. The French I picked up, in Belgium, and then I also majored in French in college because I wanted to continue and strengthen that language. And my Italian because of my mother's family and visiting we visited my family in Rome, in the summers, and I continue to because I love the language, and it's just a love of the language, but I would say my strongest to rate it, English first, probably Spanish, and then I would say Italian, and then the Portuguese and Italian similar, and then the French last because I don't use French that much as I used to in the past. So, but it's like everything else. You have to use it. If you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Right. So. Oh, yeah. I've definitely seen that with my languages because I'm doing mostly English talking now, even though I run the translation company.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. So you definitely, do you dream in any of the languages?
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Sometimes I do. Yeah. It's just, especially when you're overseas and you're thinking the language all the time, then you really, you start getting involved more with the language. But yeah, do you? I mean, I noticed you've learned Spanish in your LinkedIn, but do you know any other languages or?
I know some, well, I went to half English, half Spanish school in first and second grade when we lived in Mexico City. So I learned, in school there, and then I came back and took it all through high school and college. But I've never lived there as an adult, and so it's gotten rusty. But if I travel to a Spanish-speaking country, I can hang around a dinner table and do some talking. I wouldn't do business in it. And then French, I took through high school and college, just, love the language. And then I learned Italian because when I went over to Europe, everybody said, you'll love Italy. I said, I speak Spanish and French, I'm going to love those countries more. Love those countries, but then fell in love with Italy. I went back to learn Italian, but it messed up with my Spanish and French. So I kind of had to push that down to keep the others more current. But, I'm not using them enough right now. We need to get back on the planes and travel.
Yeah, hopefully
I have dreamt in Spanish before, and they say you hit a certain level of competency when you dream in it. So have you dreamt in all, it sounds like you've dreamt in all the languages.
Yeah, I think I would say, yeah, it's just, because naturally I've lived over there and I was very immersed and so I would say that, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So tell us about what you're doing now.
Well, I have two businesses, so to speak, to pay the bills. One is I represent an Italian company out of Modena, Italy, where a lot of your well-known high-end cars are made: Ferrari, Lamborghini, Maserati, etc. But anyway, the company I represent makes conveyors, industrial conveyors for production of various types of industries, beverage, food, pharmaceuticals, etc. And that's just like a manufacturer's rep here, an importer's manufacturer's rep, and I get paid on a commission and sell whatever I can when the opportunity arises here in the U.S. And then I also do import-export consulting because of my, I had almost in 2022, I'll have 40 years, 4 decades involved in the import-export field. So that's also kind of through those experiences, I've gained a lot of knowledge and war stories, and it's a up and down business, because as you know, consulting projects come and go, and so it's very erratic, but it's an interesting opportunity to learn about other companies and also to help grow out small businesses, whether they want to import or export.
So what kind of companies should reach out to you? Like, what would you specialize in, import, export? What are your strongest benefits you can offer?
Well, the ones that normally that I've been helping out or small, small sized companies from maybe 5 to 7,500 individuals, between maybe 3 million to $50 million company, so to speak. That's the sweet spot for me. I mean, naturally, as they get bigger, then they have more means of investing overseas in offices and things of that nature. Generally, the key thing is to have a product or a service that's exportable or importable. Naturally, you have to do your homework on whatever the product is and what markets are that you want to sell to. You always want to start small, maybe pick 3, and then do it well, and then grow and add those countries to your business. But there's a lot of things that you have to do internationally versus domestic. The banking, the way you get paid is different. Nationally, you have shipping involved with various parties. You have not only the trucks and rail, but you also have ocean or air carrier, and it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot more moving parts in an import or export transaction you need to know about. And there's also selecting, whether you want to have a distributor or you want to go through a representative, or you want to go through the government, or, there's different channels of marketing, as or selling, like your book, Global Marketing. I mean, I'm gonna have to pick it up one of these days, but I'm sure you mentioned about, marketing the product and what's, learning about the culture and whether that product fits that culture and make sure that it's adaptable to that culture, right? So.
Yes. There's a ton on that, but there was a ton in there. So let's break this down. So first you said the company has to have a product or service that you could import or export. What's the most unusual product or service that you've seen that really focused on exporting? And the reason I ask that is because I've gotten feedback. I'm talking, so you have a minute to think about that. But when I've had some marketing agencies read my book about global marketing, because there's really no other business how-to book out there about it, they've come back and they said, I never thought about that. I could be a global company. And so to me, it's breaking down the barriers. Like I know that, if you have a local dry cleaner, that's hard to bring in international business unless you want to expand it and be international.
Right.
It's heavy asset, it's locally based, and people are dropping by or getting picked up. So anyway, I'll take it back to you. What's the most unusual company you've seen with import or export?
Very interesting question. I mean, wow. Right now, I was been trying to think of some of my experiences, but most of them have been commodities, industrial products. Boy, that's a great question. It's just, yeah, let me think about that.
I know. I caught you off guard on that one. I thought it was the reason I ask it is just so many companies think, oh, well, why would I go international, or there's not really a need for my products or services. But I've heard of like wind gauges, and I've heard of consumer products that are very, if you're talking about cranberries, or you're talking about maple sugar products, or even potatoes go international from the U.S. And you think so I'm kind of curious of what kind of industry.
But for example, like chicken feet in China. I mean, they love that kind of stuff. Offals, stomachs and linings and things of that nature that we don't eat. People in Italy eat, and in other countries. It's Yeah, I understand, but I'm trying to really think of something
So
very
that's really
unusual.
interesting. So parts of the chicken that we don't eat here, we can ship to China because they eat
Yeah,
them there.
chicken feet, necks, you name it. I mean,
Oh, right.
yeah. There's a lot of weird type of parts of animals that we don't touch, but other countries would love to. They enjoy eating it.
I
So
remember
yeah.
living in Taiwan when I was a kid, and the children that lived next door were Chinese. And we went out to dinner, and they were fighting over who got to eat the fish eyes. And we were kind of like, really? So,
Yeah.
right. So it's a good message to the listeners. Think about what products that you might be throwing away that you could repurpose and sell to someplace else in the country that has a value for it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's a
that's right.
perfect example.
Yeah, there's even, when I used to, I worked, I helped a textile company, they dealt with waste, but some of the waste that they used to, the yarn waste and cotton waste and synthetic type of residue or waste that was involved in textiles, some of in the US they wouldn't use it, but in other countries they remelt it and do other things with it. So there's always, you never know what, if you have to, like you mentioned, if you have some residue or waste or some kind of byproduct, it might have another market somewhere else in the world. So
It is so true. In an earlier episode, I talked with Joe Nacito, who's in charge of international marketing for Darn Tough Socks. And then, not long after I had the interview with him, I was up with a bunch of business owners in Vermont, where their factory is, and he gave us a tour, and he showed us the waste. And like, barely anything goes to waste there
mhm,
because it's just sent off to someplace else who's,
right.
where they're using it. But Darn Tough Socks are really impressive. So if you haven't tried
Hmm.
them out, definitely do. They're impressive. Okay, so most import export. First, you have to decide. Then you said you don't have to start with all the markets. Maybe pick three, which is real
Right.
interesting because oftentimes I say pick one for translation, figure out your process, and then replicate it. But I'm curious as to why. And three is an interesting number too to do because you can leverage. So I'm curious about why you said three and how would you go about picking those three?
Yeah. Well, naturally you have to, depending on the product, you do your research on, there's a lot of ways of getting data from the government, since, the international data from the governments and different governments too overseas. And then I picked three because maybe you want to do one country in Asia, one in Europe, and one in Latin America, for example, and then see how they all, how that goes. But the important thing is to really, do your research on the product. Say, for example, I don't know, you're selling high-end bourbon, okay, and then so you do your look at. There's various uh, companies that provide stats on bourbon exports or volume of whatever the different types of bourbons, Journal of Commerce, trade stats. So there's various types. I have a whole thing of, I can provide you a list of information of different things of organizations that provide trade data. So from there, then okay, I see that, Japan uses high-end, as a big importer of bourbon. And then maybe Germany in Europe, and then maybe possibly Brazil or Mexico, because those are the biggest countries, that in Latin America that have the population and also the wealth to buy high-end products. And then you go from there, and actually then you tailor you've got to do the labeling and the packaging for that country and the translation. Like you reach out to Report International. So if you want to get everything done in German or in Japanese or Portuguese, Report International, right? And don't forget.
I love it. Yeah, you talked about my book and the company now.
Well, I got to help you out
Thank you.
too. But anyway, so you could, make sure that all that is done, the packaging and the pricing. Naturally, you have to go through, find out all the different the steps that go in the import-export transaction, and make sure you keep in mind all the different costs, and make sure you cover all your costs plus a profit and all that. What else? The marketing. Do you want to put it online? Do you want to sell it directly to a distributor? Those are choices, a channel of market that you want to use, the go-to, how you're going to go to in the market. And then, give it a try, and you learn, and then you redo or what do you call it? The Japanese Kaizen, right? The continuous improvement, and trying to, learn as you go, right? And redo and replan as you grow.
Okay, so it's not as easy as just saying, all right, I'm going to go to Italy, Venezuela, and Brazil, go forward. You're doing research on all the different markets and seeing which ones bubble up to the top.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah, because that'll save you a lot of time. And also, you may start in countries that may not have a lot of interest in the product, and then you feel and say, oh man, I don't want to import or export anymore. It's not working. So it's recommended that you do your research first, and really see what's best for your product or service overseas, or if you're importing here in the U.S. What kind of product, and where do you want to start? In the Southeast? You want to start in the Northeast? Is this something that that's weather, that might be sensitive to the weather, or some, whatever. There's a lot of questions that you got to think about, and regarding to the market and its factors, right? So
how if you're a business owner or a global, strategy person, where do you start?
Well, there's various ways. Naturally, you have the government, the U.S. government can help. There's a International Department of Commerce that helps with that have people that specialize in international trade. They can help out. The SBA has offices that also have international people that help, that have trade expertise. International consultants such as myself. You can also use, the governments overseas, whether it's the foreign government and also the U.S. government. For example, the Department of Agriculture has various offices overseas. The embassies, you can use the embassies. There are people that know, that have contacts with companies and markets and know what's going on in the country, naturally. There's very many sources. You can also, when you start importing or exporting, you want to build a team of an ecosystem to survive, to help you build your business. And that's, whether it's a freight forwarder for exporting or a custom house broker. You also want to have select a banker, some kind of banker that knows about trade finance. You also want to get help from a carrier, whether it's an airline or an ocean carrier. There's also the port people can help you, the Port of Savannah or the Port of Boston. They have people that can also help give you some advice and strategies, etc. There's just a lot of parties that can give you a lot of advice and help and direction in your business, but you have to use them and you have to choose also, you've got to have an ecosystem of people that'll help you support your business.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned the Department of Commerce. They're a wonderful resource because a lot of the consulting or the advising they do is for free.
Mm-hmm.
And they have connections all over the world. They've got employees all over the world that can help. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, the consulates, even the foreign consulates can help you. What else? Associations, like if you're involved in a steel association, maybe they could help give you also some guidance. Universities professors can help you with that, specialize in certain countries or languages or things of that nature. Inspection firms, when your car gets inspected, they can also be of help. There's just a lot of various channels that you can find information.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you were talking with like the DOC and the SBA and governments, embassies. associations, and then you got into, so they're kind of the government, NGO, nonprofit, and then there are people who are in the industry providing services like us with translation, you with consulting, and we all have tremendous networks because the global network is small about who the providers are and where to go. So I hadn't thought about that as even finding one vendor that you trust and then tapping into their network. So that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah. You have translators, even your translators, you can give maybe other leads and customers for you as well. I mean, it's just, you got to find there's different ways of getting information from different sources, right? So.
Right. And have you heard of Soft Land Partners?
Yeah, I'm a member of Softland. Yeah.
Of course, that's how we met, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why I kept bubbling up. Yeah, they're just coming out with so we're both members, and it's an organization of global service providers that help companies expand internationally. And Softland Partners is releasing in the next week a checklist, like a export readiness checklist. So that'll be a handy resource.
If you're a small company that wants to learn more about, like you said, going overseas and building their business, that Softland is a good way to learn from other folks as well, from resources to tap into. So like you mentioned, that's a good point. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, so you listed off a bunch of resources that are helpful. Okay, so if we go back, first it was a product or service that you can import or export, and then it was pick your markets. Then you got into banking and how are you going to get paid? What do you advise people on that area? I know we're kind of getting off the marketing area.
Well, that's one thing that's a big worry for a lot of importers and exporters, getting paid. You want to make sure that it's secure, your form of payment is secure, whether it's a letter of credit. There's various tools that you can, or different things that methods of getting paid, site drafts and letter of credits. And I mean, there's quite a bit of different types of, and each one has its risk level, right? Letter credit being the least risk averse, and then open credit, like if you sell somebody and say, okay, you pay me in 30 days, you just hope that they pay in 30 days, But so you have to be very careful, especially when you first start, because you want to get a history of your clients to make sure that they're paying on time, and maybe after a year you can say, okay, now that you've been a very good customer, you've been a good payer, I'm going to give you a little more leeway on your terms, or whatever your payment terms, so you can give them a less riskier vehicle to pay.
And how do people pay? Are they paying in American dollars mostly, or how do you balance the currency exchange?
You could have them pay in euros or dollars, but most of the time is naturally for American companies is done in dollars. But you can do forward contracts in currencies. That's another topic, of getting paid. Also, if you want to get paid in credit card or wire transfer or Swift, there's other forms of payment. Now you have Bitcoin, and if you want to get paid in Bitcoin, there's a growing number of ways of getting paid. But the important thing is to again, do your research on the customer, get a DMB or whatever you can get your hands on their credit history if you can, and then start with the least the least riskiest vehicle to get paid, and that would be a letter of credit or cash in advance before you ship anything, things of that nature. Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I also see PayPal being used a lot internationally, and then they have an affiliate, or subsidiary of PayPal, which is Zero, I think it is, where you can pay somebody to their bank in American dollars. And so there's all, and I've heard of other ones that have, I was seeing if I could find the names of them, that their fees are supposed to be less. So there's so many ways to get paid now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to ton more questions off of, off of those of what you were talking about, but I want you to talk about biggest mistakes
Mm-hmm.
that you've seen companies do.
Well, for one is sometimes like, with your marketing, for example, is naming a product or that might offend their culture, or they might, they might make an impact on the sale of the product. For example, I think it was Chevy or GM. They put a name of a car called Nova, Nova. In English, it's okay. Nova's fine, but when you translate Nova in Spanish, it means it doesn't go, it doesn't run. Nova, right? So it wasn't a very good marketing choice to put that kind of name in a car. That's just an example. You have to be careful of what you name the product or the service or whatever, because
Yeah.
people may take it differently, right?
Yeah, I've heard that it was true, but I've also heard that it wasn't. And the distinguishing thing was that Nova in Spanish is two words, where Nova,
Yeah.
like
Right.
Chevy Nova
Right. Yeah.
wasn't.
No. Right. Exactly.
So we're gonna have, where do you go to check those urban myths? Because
Right. Yeah.
I've heard that one. But there's one that came out recently with Zuckerberg, who named Facebook Meta.
Meta. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and that is supposed to mean death
Oh.
in Hebrew, I think it was, in Israel. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, which the irony of what it means. So, somebody emailed me that, and I was going to go back and check that.
That's funny. Yeah, you have to do your homework too. You got to be careful with.
Yes, yes. So it's a very good point, because I've heard about that just stopping products,
Yeah.
and then it takes a couple of years to recover from that.
But speaking of mistakes, naturally, when you want to go into a country, you want to do it, present the product in their language, whether it's online or print or whatever. Like, a lot of companies sometimes just go in English, and not there's countries in the world that English is not very well spoken. I mean, we take it for granted that it is the lingua franca of the world, but there are countries in the world that don't speak a lot of English. So it pays to, like you said, to get everything translated, to do everything in their language, whether it's online or print. And also make sure that it's spelling and the words, the meaning of the word is okay to use, so to speak, like we just had those examples. Those are some of the major mistakes I think that a lot of companies do. They don't, they have to adapt their product or service to that culture, and that means the translation and the verb word usage and and the way it's presented too. For example, if you're going to do an online presentation in with the Arab countries, you want to make sure that the writing is, I think they read from left to right, right? So you want to make sure all that's done, not right to left like we do, or left to right like we do. They read right to left. Excuse me, left to right, or what? Yeah. Anyway, it's
They read the opposite of what English reads.
Right.
But then sometimes with character languages, it's acceptable to put it in the English reading format, but not always, and it depends on product. So you're bringing up a very good thing, is understand your target audience and how they expect to read it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's just part of it, make sure.
So what do you think about who does your translation?
Well, I've in the past, I've used other. This is with the other companies that we use, but we always used an outdoor, a third-party translator such as yourself, and then after that's done from you, as once we get the product from you or the translation from you, what I would do is have it second eye look at it, the distributor or somebody overseas in that market look at it and say, hey, Laurent, this is good, but you should use this word instead of this word. Or, sometimes there's a little nuances sometimes that you may want the, a native person to look at it after not only the translator's done it and I've looked at it, but also I have maybe a third eye look at it just to make sure that any small nuances, are properly done, or just or things that are changed that need to be changed, right? So, and
Yeah.
there may be not a lot of things, but it just make sure that it's properly done. That's all.
Yeah, that is, I'm so glad I asked you that question, because that's like the perfect scenario on how to get marketing material translated. You have a professional do it, so you know that the grammar and the punctuation and everything like that is taken care of. And then you have internal folks review it, because if there's any company culture or industry terminology, they're reviewing it and capturing it. And then you're also making sure that your distributors or your salespeople buy into it, because if they don't like it, they won't use it.
Right.
And oftentimes it's just a stylistic word here or there. Yeah. But have you seen problems with having your distributors or internal people do the translation, or you never even gave them the opportunity?
When they do it themselves, yeah. Sometimes
Yeah.
I've seen things that the grammar wasn't well done, whether it's or maybe they didn't quite express the product right, wasn't properly presented. Yeah, there's been occasions where they needed a little bit more suggestions or what do you call it, opinion from corporate. Yeah. Sometimes you have to be careful. Yeah. So yeah, you have to.
We had a really interview earlier on the Global Marketing Show podcast with Zach Selch, who's an international salesperson. He was saying with distributors, he had seen them do translation and it was so far off that it ruined the market entry for a couple of years, and they had to pull back and then retry later on. So I have heard stories like that.
Yeah.
And it's companies think they're saving money by doing that, but it's, they don't realize the problems that they can run into. But I love how you have people review it, because translation is like writing. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't just have your marketing person write it. You're going to have other people edit it. So you make sure that it's really clear.
Right.
Yeah. So what kind of suggestions, or why should companies go global? I want to go this, because you have...
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think, for one is naturally you want to expand your revenues. For example, if there's a recession here in the U.S., you could be selling overseas and it offsets the sales here in the U.S. So it gives you another, a blanket of security by obtaining revenues from overseas countries. Another thing to look at is it also allows you to learn about possible new products from that market, or new ventures or ideas that you may get by selling in that country that you can bring back to your country, to the US or whatever. So that might be another way of, it's another positive thing that comes out of that. What else? Yeah, it also gives you a lot more to your competitor. It gives you a competitive advantage that you're selling overseas versus the guy that's still domestic and has not done anything. So it gives you a leg up, and also bragging rights. Say, hey, I'm global now. I'm not just domestic. I'm global, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it does require monies. It does require investment of time and people and adaptability of everything, right? It's not an easy venture, but it's worth it, because I think in the long run, look at all the multinationals. Those are the guys that always survive. They're always still there, because they're getting revenues from different parts of the world. They're learning from getting new products from different parts of the world. Coca-Cola, how many brands that it has. And these all have come from different countries, all these different types of tastes and different types of, liquid products that they've obtained, right?
Oh, it's fascinating. I assume you're in Atlanta, so you've been to the Coke Museum?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
go into the tasting floor. Can you describe that? Because I was blown away by all the different tastes.
Yeah, yeah, it's you know, naturally it's yeah, I mean you don't realize how many different type of flavors and unusual type of stuff that people drink overseas. And you know, I got out of there with I was shaking because of the the sugar high that you get. But yeah, but it's an interesting it's just an interesting learning experience about global, you know, business and products and tastes and likes, right? So
Right, because there were some, because they sorted them by countries, and there were some countries that had very, very more, even more sweet than the United
mhm,
States taste for
right,
soda.
right.
And then they had some countries that would have like tamarind soda or
Hmm.
unusual flavors that you'd never see here. So that's,
Yeah.
I went around to the different countries looking for the unusual flavors that I had never heard of before.
Hmm. Right.
But bottom line, they all had a lot of sugar.
Yeah. Yeah. They're still
Yeah.
making money though. I mean, there's bottled water, you know, all these seltzer waters and all these different types of, you know,
Yeah.
soft drinks. I mean, it's amazing how they keep growing and keep adding to their product line. It's crazy,
Yeah,
you
because
know.
they've taken on a lot of the athletic drinks too.
Right.
So yeah,
Exactly.
replace your
Yeah.
electrolytes. But you know, there's a company
What's
that went international and they really met the different needs.
Yeah, what's next? Are they going to give us a drink that'll make us give us 10 more years? You know, that'll be the fountain of youth? I don't know, but
Oh yeah. How
who
many of
knows?
those drinks? How many 10 years would you add on? I'm not sure I want you really to answer that.
Yeah.
Because I don't want you throwing the question back at me.
No, you know, if I don't know if I want to live to 100, but you know, as long as your quality of life is good, that's the important thing. But still, you know, right?
That's it. Can they develop a drink that adds years and quality of life?
There you go.
Yeah,
That's
with no negative benefit, no negatives to it. Then I would have at least a couple or three to four.
there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. So you have been able, since you were a child, to as an adult land in cultures all over the world and really be able to connect with people. You know, how do you do it? What's your secret for getting along with people, even if they don't share a culture and a language?
Yeah. Well, the important thing is to show respect to them. You know, if, for example, if you're in Russia, try to learn 20 words, you know, hello, the basic stuff, hello, thank you, good night, you know, just try to make an effort to learn some keywords in their, because you, keywords in their language, because it shows to them that you're making an effort to learn about their culture. You know, just be adaptable and I think that's given me a lot of my success, you know, selling and also making new friends overseas. Um, yeah, just being open-minded and curious about other cultures and trying new foods and drinks and doing their local things that they do. That's, you know, that's the beauty of it, is learning from that, and you may like some things you may not like, but you know, you learn and you take the good and the bad, right? But you take the good with you. Maybe you might take all those things that you liked about it and add it to your life, right? So
Have you ever felt uncomfortable in a situation or scared?
uh well, you know, I've had stuff robbed in my, not robbed, but I've had stuff stolen in hotel rooms in Latin America, some of my clothes. um I've never, thankfully, thank you God, I've never had any, you know, bad experiences with being held up or you know, anything like that. I was one time I had used a credit card in Colombia and got back to, you know, for a trip, got back and I saw $20,000 added to my account. So somehow they copied my card and you know, had a nice shopping spree when during my stay in Colombia. But anyway, American Express was nice enough to to cover all those costs. But there's been some difficult times like that. Getting sick once in a while. I had to call a couple doctors one time in in hotels in Brazil and in Guatemala. When I got just because of the food I ate, I wasn't very careful. There's some things that sometimes you have a little bit of bad luck, but just that's part of traveling and being exposed to foreign cultures. But thankfully, I've never had something really negative and just terrible that thank you God, nothing that really really affected me, so to speak. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting because all those things that you talked about could very easily happen no matter, even if you're in your own town at home. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah,
True. Yeah.
yeah,
Just you have to have just watch be attentive and be low key when you're traveling overseas. Naturally, don't just be careful what you uh, just be cautious like everywhere else when you're traveling somewhere. So and like
where's
you
your
say,
favorite place to do business?
I mean, they've all I can say that I've enjoyed doing business with Latins and Arabs and Europeans, some of the Asian countries, not a lot, but I just love doing business with different cultures. They all of them are different naturally, and they all have their way of doing business. Um, but I guess in Latin America, I love the Brazilians and Chileans. I enjoyed doing business with them. Um, Central America, the Costa Rica, Mexicans. They're very love Mexico. It's a beautiful, great country. Um, and I'm partial to Italy and southern, France and southern Europe, that kind of Spain. Just partial to those countries. It just, it also depends on your likes and your the Arab cultures are, they're very good people. They're very loyal, but you have to learn about the Arab culture too. I mean, it's how they conduct business and how do you can't shake hands with your left because you're not supposed to, and you can't show them the sole of your foot. There's a lot of little nuances you have to be careful in with the Arab world. But the key is to do business, to learn about their culture and be respectful and be mindful of how they do business. So.
So if you were going to a new country to do business or a new culture, how would you learn about or research that culture? Like if somebody's going to an
Yeah.
Arab
Well,
country.
there's again, the government can sometimes they have country briefs, so you can learn about through the Department of Commerce. They have different country briefs. You can actually go to a library or buy printed or online type of books on the country. There's a lot of I have a library of books that I have from how to do business overseas. Uh, uh, translation type stuff, just a library of stuff. Yeah, I'm sure you've got some things there too from, global, because it's global related, right?
Yeah.
Um,
One of my
so
favorites is Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands.
that's a
I mean,
good
that's a
book. Yeah.
classic.
Yeah. That's a very good book. In fact, I have that here too.
Ah, so we're
That's a
recording
good
this
book.
on
Yeah.
video, and he picks up his copy, and I turn around, and I have a copy right
And
over
then
my.
I got the global road warrior, how to, with all your travels and all that. There's just a lot of different things that um, and they continue to publish books. I mean, there's, people continue to write books about, sales and global sales marketing, import,
Yes,
export.
yes.
It's a
I've
lot
had
of,
people call me and say, "Hey, I'm going to business here. What do I need to do with business
mm,
cards and handshakes and bows and
right.
food and entertaining?" And so I'll do that. I'll share with what I know and send them off to somebody if I'm not really, if I can't share enough with them. So
Sure. Now, is that global marketing? Is that your first book? Or have you written something previously before that?
that's my first book. We also have a book out called Tidbits, which takes a bunch of the funny signs from around the world and does them. And then I'm co-writing another book that'll be more like the 1-Minute Manager type book about
Uh-huh.
global communications.
Oh, okay, good.
You write one, you go, it's not so bad, I'll do another one. But you really have
Yeah,
to have that, right now I'm focused on just getting this book out there so people
right.
know about it, because we get the questions all the time. And with the podcast and the book and the blog and social media, we're just trying to educate, because just do
Yeah.
it. There's it's so good. All right, so we're getting to the end of our time, but I got some standard questions that I love asking people. So I think the first one is, what's your favorite foreign word?
Yeah, I thought about it the last couple of weeks. I'm going to say there's a word in French called bricoleur, which means collector. So it could be you could be a bricoleur of experiences, of memories, of things, of art, music. I just thought it was a pretty cool word, bricoleur. I'm a collector of blah. Bricoleur of. It's kind of an interesting word. So
I love that. I'm a
yeah,
bricoleur of global business
there you
stories.
go. Yeah,
What are
right.
you a bricoleur of?
Experiences, I guess experiences and memories, I mean, that's for me, that's the key in life, right?
All
So,
right, then that's a layup for the next question. What's a memory of a um, crazy or rewarding cross-cultural experience that you've had?
wow. Um, oh, Lordy. I think just, working with the Arabs, that was a very different type of, way of doing business. It was very, very different. I mean, naturally, everything from their food and religion. And so I think that was really probably the most cross-cultural, most interesting and very unique type of experience that I had. With the Latins and Europeans, they're all similar, right? Asians, the Asians are different as well. I
Can you
haven't
take us
experienced.
back to a moment when you were working with the Arabs where you just felt like so out of place, or the food was so different, or you made a mistake, or there was something you laughed about?
Yeah, just I don't know, just the food sometimes, wasn't to my taste. I mean, for me,
What was the food you were eating?
it was um, they were some kind of lamb or something. I can't remember, but it wasn't a very appetizing dish. Um, I don't know. I mean, yeah, it's
So what did you do? Did
just,
you eat it to be polite?
well, I tried it, but it just I said I couldn't. I just couldn't. I don't want to be forced and then get sick or anything like that, right? But
Yeah.
you have to try it at least, to show them the respect again. Um, yeah, I mean, I've never tried snake or some of these, some of these Asian people eat. Sometimes they'll eat anything that walks, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, so I'm, I'm fairly adventurous, but not too adventurous, right? I'm not like what's this guy that does that food program that eats the bugs and uh, I can't
What is
remember his
his
name.
name? I know who you're
Yeah,
talking
the
about.
bald
Yeah.
haired guy. Anyway, but
Yeah.
depends to what level of adventure you want to go. But no, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
See, I'm adventurous. I like eating that stuff. The
oh,
thing that would bother me, I think, is putting anything alive in my mouth. I
oh,
might draw the
okay.
line there, but anything
Oh,
else is, yeah.
well, what's probably the most weirdest thing that you ate?
Oh, I've had snake water, which is an
Oh,
alcohol, and I've had, snails in China, but, they're called
yeah,
escargot in
yeah.
France. And
Uh-huh.
I've had, of course, venison and eel. I gotta see. I'm not ready to answer the questions. I'll try anything.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm. As long as it's not live, right? Yeah.
as long,
Okay.
yeah, something moving in my mouth might bother me. All right. How about your favorite vacation?
I think the favorite thing that I've ever done was I went around the world. I had with Delta, frequent flyer points, and at the time Delta was with 150,000 points you can do around the world. So I took I think it was 2.5, 3 weeks, and I started in the U.S., Japan, Korea, Singapore, Thailand, and then I went to Croatia, then Greece, and then back to the U.S. But it was just one of those experiences. You got to go around the world, right? It's a bucket list type of thing. So it was interesting. I enjoyed it.
So you were like 3 days in each place.
I'm sorry?
You stayed about 3 days in each place?
Yeah, 3 or 4 days. Yeah, just jumped and went on and yeah, just about a 2 or 3 week trip. But you can still do it. I don't know how many points you use it, but as long as you travel, in
one direction.
One direction. You can't go back. You can go laterally, but you can't. But it's an interesting experience, and I recommend it if you ever, if you want to do something on your bucket list to go around the world. So
I've heard of people doing it. I don't think I've ever actually talked to somebody who did. So that is so cool. And you did it fast. I mean, when I've heard about people doing it, they take a couple months. So that's amazing.
This was right after September 11th, and so there was very little, not so many people traveling, like 4 or 5 months after after that terrible incident. But yeah, I mean, but it was an experience, it's like anything else. That's probably the most interesting trip I've ever done.
Oh, I think that's fabulous. That's one of the most fun ones that I've heard. Around the world in 3 days.
You need to do that. Do your global marketing tour.
Oh, I am all over that. Now I just have to figure out how I'm going to work that into the schedule.
Save your point. Save your point.
Yeah, I don't have any points from the last couple of years. That's a bummer. So what final recommendations would you have for our listeners?
As far as what, going overseas or just
global marketing, global business.
I think just to be open-minded and give it a try. As you mentioned, maybe one market overseas, 3 markets overseas. Do some importing if you want to add to your business. Do something different. It adds perspective, variety and perspective, and new revenues, new learning experiences. Who knows? It could change your business, right? So.
Yes. Well, you have been a wealth of information. If people want to reach out to you, where should they go?
Yeah. Well, you can naturally you can look at my LinkedIn, Laurent Kahl, Kahl, last name. My cell number here in the U.S. is 404-731-2415. And my email is first name, last name. That's Laurent, Laurent, Kahl, Laurent Kahl at BellSouth, BellSouth.net. So if you'd like to reach me, if I could be of help in any way or any kind of advice, let me know. And thank you, Wendy. I really appreciate the time. I enjoyed our conversation. I learned many things from you as well today, and I hope you do the same with me. And I hope, wish you a lot of success with your book and your talk show and Report International.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, you just had so much practical advice. And so I think if anybody's even got a glimmer of thinking about exporting or importing, you reach out to Laurent and pick his brain or ask for introductions through Softland Partners or his extensive network. I'm sure you can find a way. So thank you, Laurent. I appreciate it.
Okay, hasta luego. Gracias. Next week.
Hasta luego.
Muito obrigado. Grazie. Ciao. Thank you. Bye-bye. All the best.
That's a wrap for this session. A big thanks to you for listening to the Global Marketing Show. Hope you had just as much fun as I did. New sessions launch weekly on all places you find podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and of course on our website. If you know someone interested in this topic, please tell them about us. Au revoir for now.